Okay, guys. So we are live, and obviously you can always ask questions, but you guys can always come back and catch more notes if you need to. Okay. So we're gonna be talking about in this unit. We're gonna be talking about developmental psychology. Okay. We're gonna be talking about the growth of human beings from basically conception, all the way to the scary moment of our existence here on this planet as conscious beings. Okay. So we're gonna be talking about that. At any moment in time, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and write something in the chat box, or you can go ahead and raise your hand and ask a question. Okay. So there are three major things we're going to be talking about in this particular module, but we're going to go through three of them today. Okay. So there are a couple of major issues that we're going to be talking about in psychology. Developmental psychology, it's the part of psychology, and it's a branch, and as you guys already know, as we studied in Unit 1, psychology has a lot of different branches. Okay, one of the big ones and one of the more interesting ones that I find fascinating would be developmental psychology. We're talking about the physical growth and maturation and processes of how we grow up physically, how we grow up mentally in terms of cognitive ability, and how we interact with other people in terms of society. So we're going to be talking about all those different changes throughout life. One of the biggest debates that continues to pop its ugly head up, well, ugly is a bad word, interesting head, is the whole idea of nature versus nurture. For those of you guys that are going to take the AP exam this upcoming May, just remember that this idea right here, nature versus nurture, is going to probably be there. So make sure you understand it really well, because as you've already seen, it keeps popping up over and over and over again. You may have an idea of which side of this argument you might lie on, but it's always a good idea to make your arguments more full and be able to expand on them a little bit more. Okay. Remember, you're trying to convince somebody off in wherever that's grading your write up that you know what you're talking about. So there are two arguments about how we develop as human beings. One of those arguments, and there are at least three different people, Piaget, Kohlberg, and Erickson, that say that we develop in different stages of development. You will notice that there are different psychologists that say, oh, at this stage, you are this kind of way. And then you graduate to the next stage where you do this, and then you go on to the next stage. Psychologists doubt that there are stages. There are some of them. Some of them say that it's a continuation, that it's not stages. You just keep going and going and going. Again, this is a part of psychology that you have to be able to articulate yourselves and be able to say and make arguments to back up your claim. And again, there are merits and there are ways to argue for both sides. Now, there's also the other argument: our stability over change over time. This is talking about in terms of temperament. Some people are very quiet by nature. My 2-year-old daughter is super quiet. She does not like talking, but she knows what she wants. She'll tell you right off the bat, this is what I want right now. There are other kids, and like my wife was saying, that immediately, as soon as they're able to speak words, they talk. They talk, they talk. My 12-year-old daughter, as my wife said, was like that. She talked at one and continues to talk, articulate a lot. But those are temperaments. Usually, the way you are right now, in terms of attitude and temperament, is the way you're going to be for the rest of your life. It doesn't really change so much. All right. Let's go ahead and continue. So, we all know what conception is. And obviously, we know that conception is the meeting of two different sex cells, basically the egg and a sperm cell. Okay. So, just be aware of those right there. Once a egg and sperm cell meet, obviously the first step in the creation of a human being is the creation of a zygote. This happens in the first 2 weeks. You guys already know this because you guys taken biology. This is pretty standard for you guys already. After that, then it becomes an embryo all the way up to the second month, and then a fetus after the 9 weeks all the way up to birth. So those are the stages of in utero human development. Now, involved in the creation of a human being, we all know what the placenta is, that sac. in which the baby is encased, as you can see right here. One of the interesting things is that the human body, well, not any human body, but a woman's human body has the ability to protect the baby and filter out many different tetragens that could possibly harm a unborn child. So we are talking about anything in the environment like chemicals, some sort of pathogen, some sort of poison. The human women's body are able to filter it and prevent any damage to the fetus. But there are, oops, but there are certain things that, let me go ahead and restart it again. But there are certain agents or tetragens that a woman cannot protect the fetus from, and that's alcohol. Um, and that gives it something known as fetal alcohol syndrome. Okay. What ends up happening is, and that's why they recommend that women do not drink when they're pregnant, because what ends up happening is that could damage the fetus in utero. And I've seen students when I used to teach special ed that had um, those kind of conditions, and you can tell their face looks a little bit different. Their cognitive abilities are not within the normal range, so it actually does happen. So that's why you always see, not that you see, but one would see in general on alcoholic beverages the warning that drinking can cause birth defects, and that is a severe birth defect. Now, when we are born as human beings, we all do have some reflexes, things that we do automatic. So, what are some of those reflexes that we have automatic? Um, I found this very interesting because when my 2-year-old daughter was born, I actually was able to prove this. And when my baby will be born in about within 2 weeks, I can probably go ahead and bring her and do a lab on her, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. One of the things I noticed is that if I touched her cheek like this, the newborn baby, she would turn and she would try to suckle my finger, because obviously all the way back to when we were cave people, the way a woman would feed a child is by breastfeeding. So obviously that's one reflex that the kids are always trying to learn. One of the other things that I noticed, and this sounds messed up, but I did it on a bed, not on the floor, is that kids, when they think they're falling, will go like this, and they will like extend themselves out. Some of you guys may be thinking, why would a baby do that? Evolutionary psychology. That's why. Think about it. Back in our ancestors up in trees, a baby falls, they don't want to die, so they grab the stuff, and that way they don't fall all the way down. Now, this word right here called habituate, I can't even pronounce it right now, but habituation, whatever. What happens with kids is that when they see new information all the time, they're always stimulated by that kind of information. And because it's new and different, they're always looking at it or trying to touch something. I even just noticed with my 2-year-old daughter. She's trying to grab everything. Things she's seen already and is bored with, she won't grab. But new things, she always wants to get. And this is the same thing right here with visual stimuli for newborns. Okay. One of the other things I want to let you guys know, yeah, and they prefer new things over old. All right, let's see. One last thing about 45 is a lot of babies cannot see very far when they're born. They only have the ability to see within 3 feet in front of them. Think about that. Why would a baby only be able to see 3 feet in front of them? Think about that. Yeah, the mama. Yeah, I could read lips too. So obviously, they are born with reflexes, and that's what they are, reflexes that make them able to survive, right? So that there's a reason why babies look so cute, because obviously human beings are attracted to things that look aesthetically pleasing, right? That way, the human being takes care of that baby. Um, the other thing is the babies know automatically to cry in order to get attention. That's what they do automatically, because they can't say, "Oh, hey, I got a doo doo in my diaper, change me." No, all they do is cry, right? Does anyone have any questions so far? Obviously, you can always ask them in the chat box. All right. Well, no one's saying anything, so I'm assuming we're all good. Let's talk about 46. Infancy and child physical development. So, how do kids develop at a young age? We're going to be talking about the brain. So, the actual definition word of maturation it's the growth processes that enable us to behave a certain way and are influenced by our own experiences. So this is your growing up physically, okay? If you had the slides presentation already open with you right there, you can just go ahead and get this definition there anyways. So let's talk about brain development. Um, we are born with all the brain cells that we need. All the brain cells that you need for the rest of your life, you are born with. Now, that does not mean that you cannot lose some brain cells. I'm going to give you guys a piece of advice. Your guys' brains, you guys right here in this class, don't stop growing till you're 25 years old. Ingesting certain substances that could alter your state of mind, you know what I'm talking about, you guys aren't idiots, has the potential to damage your brain cells, and you can't get those back. So just be aware of that right there. Now, pruning process. What we're talking about are the neural connections that we have when we're born. If you look at the first picture right there that says at birth, those are the kind of neural connections that we have as human beings when we're born. 3 months, a little bit more extensive, and then 15 months, it gets more and more detailed. There's more of it. As we get older, our brain starts maturing and making all these connections and just growing as a brain. Let's talk about motor development. One of the things that is a hallmark of human being development. The first one is obviously, can a baby be on their tummy and raise themselves up? Sort of like a yoga pose. That's the big one right there. The next big marker is, can a baby crawl? Those are really big markers in maturation. The next one right here that we have is, can a baby walk? Now, here's some information that you will find very interesting. About 25% of children, when they're born, can walk by the age of 11 months. That's 25%. At 12 months, 50% of all children are already walking. And then by 15 months, about 90% of those kids can actually walk. So as you can already see, we have a range going all the way from 11 months to 15 months. No single human being is ever develops in terms of motor development right on time. And I am so rude because I forgot to introduce Miss B. Miss B right here is going to be joining us this semester, and she's the student teacher this year. I will find out for myself how the development of my next child is, and I guess in my head compare it to the one I had now. But again, just be aware of that not every single human being develops in terms of motor development at the exact same time. It's a range, okay? There's a range. So just be aware of that. Now, the one thing I want to bring your guys' attention to this is there's a phenomenon known as infantile amnesia, where most of the time, we as human beings will tend to forget things that happened before the age of 3. If you think about it really hard, why do we have a hard time remembering many events before the age of 3? Think. Your brain is undergoing so many changes between the time you're born and to the time of 3 that your brain is just busy trying to make all these neural connections. All right? It's not really interested, or its primary function is not to try to get you to remember things. That's why there's a big case of infantile amnesia. Be aware that in terms of psychology, and always there are outliers, human beings, our first memories can occur around the age of 3 or 3.5. That's when you can actually start remembering stuff that happened to you around 3 or 3.5. Prior to that might not be real. It may, there's always outliers, but just be aware of that. 3 to 3.5 is when you can form your earliest memories. By the age of 4 to 8, that's where children start losing their amnesia and start remembering more things long term. So around 4 to 8, that's where you start remembering things more long term. Questions about this? No questions. Okay, let's go on to module 47. This will be the last one, and then we'll move on to the next portion of the class. So 2 little things that we're going to be talking about in terms of cognitive development. All right. So now we're talking about the brain right here. Let me go ahead and get my notes. This one might take a little bit more time to talk about. So, what is cognition? Those are all the mental activities that you can undertake. How you think, how you know things, how you remember things, and how you communicate with people. All of this is cognition. It's four different things. So just be aware of that. It's not just one single thing. Excuse me. The one guy who is very prominent in studying this development in children, his name is Jean Piaget. He's this Swiss, I think he's Swiss, but yeah, he's from Europe. So Jean Piaget came up with an idea of how we as human beings are able to digest information and remember information. So the first idea is called a schema. All right. This is just basically a concept, a framework that tries to help you organize all your information. All right. Just think of it like a big outline, a rough draft of whatever you're trying to learn. This is known as a schema. Now, another way in which we get new information, to quote Star Trek, is through assimilation, right? What we do is when we assimilate information, is basically we are interpreting these new things that we see and trying to make them fit into our existing schemas. I'll give you an example from my world history class. This week, we are studying the beginning of World War One. It's the red countries against the blue countries on the map. Red and blue. Red versus blue. What does that sound like? It sounds like basically gangs, right? So the blue gang versus the red gang. I know it's a very bad example, but we get it now. Or I even tell them, it's basic. Well, this is a really old example, but I would tell them the example of the 1990s hip hop rivalry between West Coast hip hop and East Coast hip hop. Basically, I'm getting information that I understand and applying it to new information in order to help me understand it better. You guys do that all the time with your friends when you're learning new information. You basically explain it to them using terminology and using examples from your shared experience, from your own shared peer culture right there. So that's what assimilation is. Accommodation is when you're adapting your current understanding to incorporate new information. So you're just basically morphing it to make you understand some new information. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at this picture right here. This is the example. So this 2-year-old kid right here has the idea of what a dog is. And I remember this distinctly as a 3.5, 4-year-old growing up. The schema that this child has is that a dog is an animal that has 4 legs and has fur. That's the schema. Now, the little girl in this picture in the middle sees a cat. What does she say? Oh, it's a doggy. The mother goes, no, that is not a doggy. But she goes, I'm confused. It has fur and it has 4 legs and a tail. Isn't that a doggy? No, it's not. That's a cat. So as you can see, this child is learning new information. That happened to me too. I remember seeing a cow because the next door neighbor had a cow. And my dad said, oh, that's a cow. In Spanish, he said vaca. And the next time I saw a dog and I go, vaca. No, son, that's a dog. Or the other one, things that fly are birds, right? And I would call a butterfly a bird. And my dad would say, no, that's a butterfly. Everybody, we all did this. We all went through this learning experience, right? Questions so far? No? Okay. Now, moving on to the next stage. This is the stage that occurs. Oops, what the heck's going on? Let me go ahead and end this. Oh, duh. I have all my notes here. I can talk, but not that fast, dude. Chill out. What's even more funny is it's being recorded. You guys can go back and look at all the bloopers, I guess, in person. All right. So sensory motor stage. This is Piaget's theory. He's talking about we go through this between the age of where we're born all the way to around 2 years old. So Piaget is this guy who thinks we go through stages. All right. You're going to see other different developmental psychologists who are going to say that no, there's no such thing as stages. It's just very gradual. But Piaget is the one that says that we have stages. So he says the first stage between the birth and 2 years of age is known as the sensory motor age. This is where a lot of kids are more interested in doing things and being more physical, right? And I can attest to that because my 2 year old wants to grab everything, throw things, put them in her mouth, just do things all the time. And then one interesting thing, and if you ever played with a baby, the game Peekaboo, they always laugh, right? Because they don't know where your face went. They think you're doing a trick, a magic trick. Because a lot of these kids at that age don't have this idea known as object permanence. One of the videos you guys are going to watch for Discovering Psychology is going to show you a study in which some of those psychologists had 2 year olds, 1 year olds. And it's very funny. They put a toy car going down a ramp, and then they put the car at the end of the ramp behind or in front or behind a piece of board, and then they expect the car to be there. And when they lift it and they don't see it, they're like, "What happened to it?" It's a magic trick. If you have any young family members or anybody who's really young, the best trick you can do is standing in the doorway with a sheet cover, go like this, go like this, go like this. The last time, move out of the way, and they're just going to laugh. You've probably seen the same thing with people doing that with dogs. They at that age, we as human beings don't understand that objects can still exist even though we can't see them. They lack that abstract thinking, that ability to think in the abstract. All right. So, yeah, it's just a very interesting age to be at. So for them, it's out of sight, out of mind. If I don't see it, it don't exist. That's why a lot of young kids, especially around the age of 2, they have this fear of not seeing their mom. They always have to see their mom because if they don't see their mom, to them, the mom doesn't exist. So that's why they always had to be around mommy, right? All right, so we talked about sensory motor stage, object permanence. And here's that baby with a doll underneath the sheet. And you go, oh, and it's there again. Oh, look at those chubby cheeks. Very cute baby. So here's some baby math. Objects placed in place. You lift up the screen. You empty hand enters and takes away some of those objects. And then the baby either thinks either there's going to be only 1 or 2. You know, for them, it doesn't exist. It's just very weird how we are very, it's just funny. I think it's just funny and cute. Pre-operational stage. This occurs from around the age of 2 all the way up to 6 or 7 years old. And this is where a kid starts learning how to use language and do mental operations with their mind. Okay. Now, this picture right here, the child obviously thinks that both of those milk could get that out of the way. Both of those milk containers are equal because they look the same, right? So let's take a look at what happens next. We get the same container of milk, but put it in a taller one, and she will say that the taller one has more milk because it looks bigger. Again, you guys are intelligent enough to understand that that's not how measuring and liquids and lengths it works. The way it is they're both the same. Just because you change it in a different container made it taller, it's the same exact thing. But see, kids at that age are not able to think in the abstract, are not able to think logically yet, right? There is a push to try not to teach algebra to kids who are in junior high because they say that kids in junior high do not have the logic or abstract ability to think in the abstract. And if you guys ever taken any algebra classes or trigonometry or trying to think other calculus, you guys understand. Charlotte's shaking her head. No, well, yeah, I know, me too. You guys understand that math is a very abstract subject. You need to do a lot of abstract thinking. It isn't like biology where you can dice up a frog. Dice up, that sounds bad. Dissect a frog, right? But anyways, continuing, I get on up on a tangent here. You guys tell I'm excited to be back? I am. All right. A lot of kids are egocentric. Which means they're conceited, and it's not on purpose. It's not some sort of indictment on their own personality. It's just they cannot think outside themselves. All they think is about themselves and what's going on in their own world. They can't take on somebody else's, as you guys would say, POV. They can't take on anybody else's point of view. So they are by nature very egocentric. Again, as a child gets older, they learn that there are different points of view, right? If you try to teach a child at too young of an age to feel bad for people who are going through pain, that ain't gonna happen because they need to be understand that other people can feel pain, right? I find it hilarious that my 2 year old will literally hit me or scratch me or punch me, and I go, ow, and I pretend to cry, and she's like, whatever. She's not there yet. She's not there yet. So Piaget also has a theory of mind, and these are ideas about our own and other mental states. It's ideas about other people's feelings, what they think, their thoughts, and their behaviors. Um, Take a look if you have, well, obviously we all have YouTube. Take a look at PBS videos like Sesame Street. Take a look at videos like Caillou. I think he got canceled, but whatever. That little bald kid, not Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but Daniel Tiger. A lot of these shows are trying to teach children that there are different points of view in society, and there are other people have feelings just like them. I see it all the time. The show my daughter watches called Coco Melon. Like, oh, daddy has an ouch. Daddy has an ouch. What can we do? What can we do? So again, these shows are trying to teach children that other people have different ideas and thoughts. It's not just all about them. Now, around 7 to 11, this is known as a concrete operational stage. This is where kids can actually start doing things more in more concrete fashion and can actually think a little bit more logically. I'm not saying that they're going to become statisticians or mathematicians, but the mathematics get a little bit more complex. It is no longer just doing simple algebra, or not simple math problems. We're talking about more complex math problems. So, like around fifth and sixth grade, that's where you start learning doing more long division, more multiplication with longer numbers. Start doing more word problems because you are trying to challenge the individual to become a deeper thinker. But that occurs around 7 to 11 years old. Now, this begins around 12, which is the formal operation stage. And again, personally, I mean, I get it why they want to teach children algebra during junior high. You can do some basic one, but you're in a pickle here. Anyways, I'm talking about education policy. I don't want to do that. Anyways, so at the age of 12 years old is where children can start learning more abstractly. All right. I think one of the issues that I might have with trying to teach very abstract concepts to kids at the age of 12 is that at the age of 12, children are not entirely mature emotionally. They're thinking too many about two other things, about how they look. We're concerned about that, how they look in front of their friends. Again, I could be wrong, and I am probably wrong. There's always outliers. We all know that, right? There's always outliers. But usually at this age is where you start doing more abstract concepts. So here are the typical age range and description of stages, as you can see. I always find it funny that during the age of 0 to 12, a lot of kids have stranger anxiety. It just cracks me up when I see Christmas pictures of kids sitting on Santa's lap and they start freaking out and crying. That's called stranger anxiety. And you can tell right away at what stage of development, according to Piaget, they are. And again, 2 to 7 year old kids are very egotistical. They try to pretend play. 6 to 11, that's when you start doing more math. And then 12 all the way to adulthood, that's when you start doing more abstract problems and being able to mature a little bit more. Now, there are different points of view of development. Piaget was the one that talked about stages, right? And I'll go back to what I'm talking about right here. Stages. This is Piaget's idea, that there's different stages. There are other psychologists who say, you know what, I don't believe in that. I think, as this guy right here, the guy with the V, he's the one that thinks that it's actually more of a continuation, right? If anybody knows what a scaffold is, if you ever seen I'll tell you what it is in real life and tell you what it means in terms of thinking and development. A scaffold. If you ever been to a building, and it's usually those metal bars that are outside of a building that painters stand on to be able to paint or build, and then they put more on top and then more on top to get higher and higher. That is a scaffold. Yeah, exactly, Miss Price. Now, as in terms of mental development and acuity, the scaffold is you start off with your most basic skill, and then once you've mastered that basic skill, you develop the next one, and then you go on to the next one. Miss Price, go for it.
Is it
Is it
kind of
kind of
like
like
that
that
one
one
pyramid
pyramid
that's
that's
like if
like
you
if you
have your
have your
basic
basic
needs
needs
met, then
met,
you
then
can
you can
add
add
this
this
upon and
upon
that
and that
upon? It's
upon?
like,
It's like,
is it
is
like
it like
that?
that?
Yes, it is sort of related to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yes, exactly. It's Maslow's. So he's saying that it's basically we're scaffolding, and it's more of a continuation. Let me go ahead and get my notes so I don't mess up myself right here. Yeah. So he's basically saying that we're just developing as we go through time. Let me tell you more exactly what we're talking about. Now, it's not really a big theory because obviously they don't really dedicate a lot of time to it. What I would do if I were you is I would go through the textbook and check out what they talk about it a little bit more because it is important. I don't know. I hope they're not messed up and have you compare Piaget and this guy's theory because that would be really messed up. But you never know. So let's reflect on Piaget's theory. Piaget is a very important and very influential developmental psychologist. If you if you ever told somebody you're taking AP psychology, the first thing they're going to come out and say, "Oh, like Freud, that guy with the beard and the cigar." You're like, "Yeah." Well, if you are taking AP psychology, you know that's not the only psychologist out there. The other big one is this guy right here named Piaget. He is very influential. Normally, if we were in person teaching, I would have you guys do is create a toy catalog based on the different stages of Piaget. And basically, what you would do is you would go on Amazon or Target or whatever other place that sells toys for kids and find a toy that corresponds to that different age group. But we won't do that because there's no way for me to collect it. I like collecting those and I like showing the students what they are. There's a lot of different toys, but he had his is the most one of the most influential developmental psychologists. So what he's saying is that we develop as human beings. It's a continuous process. It never ends. Um, you as a human being, and I'm going to tell you guys right off the bat, you never stop learning. All right. You always learn new things. You always keep learning, trying to improve yourself. But PJ is saying it's more continuous. He's also placing a larger emphasis on social factors like how does the group affect the individual's development as a human being. Obviously, we as human beings, with the exception of this pandemic, do not develop in isolation by ourselves. Um, when we get into the social psychology at the end of our course, you're going to see that the development of human beings is dependent on being around other people. It actually helps us to develop and we learn more by being around other people. There's a reason why a lot of your fellow schoolmates, and I'm not just talking about your classmates in this class, a lot of your fellow schoolmates are having such a hard time with online learning. Not because they are not wizards at using computers, because I bet you anything, if there is a new app that came out tomorrow, like a new social media app, they'd be right on it right away. It's that the reason is because we are social creatures. You guys already know that. We feed off of each other. If you guys were in class together, you guys would be talking and you guys will be sharing information and gossip, which is perfectly fine because that's part of human nature is to be gossipy, just not too much though. But anyways, I digress. Ah, there's that picture I told you about. Stranger anxiety. That kid crying. I don't think that man's Santa Claus, but maybe he is. I don't see anybody dressing that way. But yeah. All right, guys, that is it for today's lecture discussion. Let me go ahead and exit out of this. And then I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Come on.